Today, we're looking at Krishna's Yellow Valley, so hold on. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. There's timestamps down below so that if you want to skip around, you can, but if you got the time, check out the entire video. You can follow me over on Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Duke 209 with a Fude nib. I used it for a day, and then I used it to take the notes for this video. This first writing sample is done with a standard set of paper, Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now, there are additional writing samples that will occur later. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in bottle form, back when I ordered a whole bunch from them. If I was just ordering inks online, I don't know that I would have gotten this based on its name, and I would have been greatly disappointed. To keep my writing samples consistent, I used a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. The shade is ridiculous. The amount of shading that's going on, it's absolutely crazy. Look at the word Krishna and how much it shifts from mid to darks to lights to mids and darks all over again, all the way through all of the writing. This is ridiculous how much it is. And to have a very yellow leaning ink that reads so easily is really nice. Now it gets quite a bit darker, gets more gold or golden brown as we get wetter. The extra fine is a significantly darker tone than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and watch out for that shade. It is nuts. We go, look at the word dog, lights to darks to lights to darks, constantly back and forth. It shifts like 6 times just in the word dog. Amazing stuff. Over starts very light and works its way much darker all the way through. The looks lighter on the bottom and darker on the tops. Gorgeous. 9 seconds to dry. This stuff shades like camouflage. The medium significantly darker than the extra fine. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and you would think with it getting so much darker it wouldn't shade, and yet it does. Brown looks lighter on the bottom than it does on the top. Quick is a very dark word. Dog is much lighter than the word quick. It's just over. Starts as a mid-tone, gets very dark, mid-tone again, very dark. The starts very light, becomes very dark quickly. Beautiful. 14 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we get tons of color variation here. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal amounts of Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread. It has some haloing going on, only with the only in the stub. In the word valley, I see a lot of haloing going on where it looks like it's just traced darker all the way around, which is incredibly interesting. You don't get to run into a ton of halo in a lot of different inks, and this one has it. I always love when it shows up. The extra fine is... halo, no sheen, tons of shading. It's ridiculous. The halo gets better as it gets darker. The extra fine is darker than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, no halo here, no sheen, beautiful shading. Tomoe River doesn't tend to shade very well for me, and here it does. When an ink can shade well on Tomoe River, there's nothing that can slow this ink down. The word the goes from a nice mid-tone to dark to a lighter mid-tone again, quick. The left side of the Q is much darker than the right side of the Q. The K is incredibly dark compared to the rest of the word. It is gorgeous. 13 seconds to dry. Medium, significantly darker than the extra fine, and again you would expect some of that shading to go away, and yet it doesn't. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. Yes, it has shade, because look at the word fox. It starts very dark, it goes to a mid-tone, and at X it gets very dark. Brown starts very dark and works its way lighter. Quick starts dark, gets mid-tone, becomes very dark again. Beautiful. 21 seconds to dry, very worth the time to wait. The scrubby for both don't show a ton of color variation. but we got it up in the writing samples, so that's not always 100%. Rhodia, no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and look at the shading that this thing keeps getting. I love how it looks in the stub because it really maintains that yellow that it can be. Krishna is an entirely different tone than the word yellow. Yellow is an entirely different tone than valley. We have 3 different tones here, and it's shifting tones through yellow, getting a little darker as that second L, the OW, is a little bit darker than the yell of yellow. The extra fine gets a little bit darker than the stub. The extra fine has no feather spread, halo sheen, and it has, again, still amazing shading. The shame is this bottle is so small because I've been killing this ink. It's really dense. The is very dark compared to the word over. And over starts as a nice light tone and works its way all the way to dark. The K in quick is way darker than anything else around it. Beautiful. 10 seconds to dry. The medium significantly darker than the extra fine. The medium has no feather spread, halo sheen, and it still offers shading. Looking at the B in brown, it's light, very dark, mid-tone at the top, very dark at the bottom. Mid-tone between the B and the R is very dark, and the O goes from dark to mid-tone. Beautiful. Constant color shifting on this ink. 16 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us color variation when you look at them far left to far right. And we get lots of color variation. Such a gorgeous ink. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this light gray that's working its way up the bottom. We see that golden yellow and then this kind of brownish tone across the top. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And with only 10 minutes, that gray line across the bottom really seeped in, really bonded with the paper. It does make you say you need to watch out when it comes to this for some of its resistance. And that's just my guess. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I'm immediately drawn to the capital H where it blew out on the lower left side of it, which is surprising, but I just, I would have never thought of using a yellow ink for note-taking. I would use this for note-taking as long as I am not highlighting. The moment I know that I need to go back and be able to highlight, then I probably wouldn't use this because I'm just really risk-averse. Water reactivated and lifted everything except the gray that was left in the second chromatography. That gray is still very much there and not budging. The same thing happens with pen flush. It's removing everything except the gray. Pen flush may not be enough to get this out of your pen. The 1/3 bleach solution does completely obliterate this ink out of or off the paper. I did need to use the 1/3 bleach solution to get this out of my pen where I wrote for a day, but I had it in there for, a couple days before and a few days after. I would say just watch out, put the ink in the pen that you want to use that day, because it is a little more stubborn to get out of your pen. I test viscosity or flow with a thing called a tilt test. I'll link it somewhere down below or up in the cards. Now, for the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Krishna's Yellow Valley has a viscosity of 1.65, making this a wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all 6 of those numbers. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Krishna's Yellow Valley has an average dry time of 14 seconds, making it just barely into normal, but normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Krishna's Yellow Valley, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, it's hard to have any color other than black with this and not draw attention, so I decided to just go ahead and get another standout color to go with it. I went with a nice blue Colorverse Quasar. Now, because I was unsure and it was called yellow, and I fell into the same trap as so many people, the second writing sample is only done on the Hazel notebook. The shame here is that I had low expectations on my ability to read this ink, and when I put the paper together for the writing samples, I really only chose the Hazel because I really like testing this ink with, or this paper with the Krishna inks. So I only have this one additional paper. Hazel paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it still offers shading. And this paper is very absorbent. When we look at the S to H, there's a huge shift in color from the S up to the H and to the N. It shades very nicely. The two L's in Valley have different tones to them. The extra fine is noticeably darker than the stub. The extra fine is no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it still offers shading quite well. Look at quick how it starts as a nice mid-tone and works its way very dark. Brown starts as a dark tone and works its way back down to a mid-tone. Beautiful stuff. The goes from much lighter to much darker, and the word lazy is much lighter than some of the words around it. Look at how dark the OG comes from dog. Very nice. And only 3 seconds to dry. Now, the medium is significantly darker than the extra fine. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and still offers very decent shading. Not great shading, but decent shading. We look at the O and over is lighter than the rest of the word. The D for dry is lighter, working its way darker. The lazy starts dark and works its way light. 5 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we did get plenty of color variation, and that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Krishna's Yellow Valley? I think the colors, tones, and shading of this ink are absolutely amazing. It's the name it's got a problem with. People are going to avoid this ink because it's called Yellow Valley, and you're missing out. It's worth trying a sample for everyone. It's gorgeous. So what pen and nib would give you the best writing experience with this ink? I loved it in a fude. I love it in a very wet stub. It really brings out that camouflage shading that this ink has to offer. If you've made it this far, and according to my analytics, 50% of you aren't, and you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed, I would invite you to subscribe, and thanks for watching.